case. We need to speak with Lena Reyes right now.
You can talk to me. Do you have a judicial warrant?
We're not here to argue. We just need a quick conversation with her.
Not back there. Employee area is private. Show me a judge-signed warrant, or you stay in the public area.
Don't interfere with federal business.
What happened when 3 masked ICE agents walked into a packed neighborhood cafe in Madison and decided they could pull a worker out from behind the counter on a last-name match? It didn't turn into a quiet conversation. It turned into a public standoff. And the cameras didn't just catch an ugly moment. They caught a federal team pushing past basic rules on private property. Quick pause. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you watch stories where people keep their dignity, hold the line, and make power answer to process, hit like and subscribe. These situations don't get handled by courage alone. They get handled by receipts. Now, rewind a bit, because this didn't start with yelling. It started with confidence, the kind that comes from people who assume nobody will challenge them. The cafe sat in a busy strip where everyone knew everyone. Lunch rush bled into mid-afternoon, laptops open, strollers parked by the window, regulars posted up like it was their second living room. The worker they wanted was Lena Reyes. Early 20s, fast hands, soft voice. Always on time. She didn't share much about her life outside work, not because she was hiding something, but because she'd learned what happens when people hear a Spanish last name and start guessing. The owner was Owen Carver. Not flashy, not the type who wanted to be a hero online. He ran his business tight. Schedules, training, clear boundaries. He also had a policy for law enforcement contact. Written down. Employees had seen it during onboarding. It wasn't anti-cop. It was follow the rules or leave. That afternoon, the front door opened and 3 men walked in wearing masks, not medical masks. Face coverings that made the whole room tense on instinct. They didn't browse the menu. They didn't line up. They scanned the counter like they already owned it. They identified themselves as U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and said they were looking for Lena Reyes. They said they needed to question her. Right there. Right now. Like the cafe was their interview room. Owen stepped forward before they could angle around the register. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't posture. He asked for what mattered. A judicial warrant. The agents didn't produce one. They tried to keep moving anyway. Toward the side gate that separated customers from the workspace. Toward the back where bags were stored and staff took breaks. They acted like the counter line was a suggestion. Owen blocked the path. He told them the employee-only area was private, and they weren't entering without the right paperwork. He also made it clear Lena wasn't being questioned on the floor like some public example. The agents tried the usual pressure game. They implied Owen was interfering. They implied they didn't need permission. They implied the badge did the talking. Owen didn't take the bait. He kept the same tone and repeated the same point. Private property, employee protections, and no access beyond the public area without a judicial warrant. That's when the staff clocked what was happening and moved without panic. Maya, the shift lead, slid Lena back and away from the front line. Jamal stepped out from the kitchen area and stood shoulder to shoulder with Owen. Priya, the assistant manager, didn't argue with anyone. She pulled out her phone and made a call to the neighborhood business district office. In less than a minute, it became a barrier. No shouting. Just a line that said, "You're not walking through us." Customers started recording. The agents kept trying small moves. Step left. Step right. Lean forward like they might slip through a gap. They looked for the weak spot. There wasn't one. They tried changing the target. They pointed toward Lena again, even though she wasn't in reach. They wanted her to react. They wanted fear. Fear makes people talk fast. Fear makes people comply. Lena didn't give them that. She stayed behind the staff line, hands tight, eyes forward, breathing shallow. She looked like someone forcing herself to stay steady because she knew one wrong move could become a headline. Owen stayed locked in, calm, procedural. He didn't debate immigration. He didn't argue politics. He kept it on one track. Authority has limits, and paperwork matters. That's the part a lot of people miss. He didn't win the moment with a speech. He won it by refusing to let them change the rules mid-play. Then the agents made their biggest mistake. They kept pushing after being told no. They kept trying to turn private space into their workspace without the authority to do it. And that's when Priya's call paid off. Because the neighborhood business district's legal counsel didn't send an email. She showed up. Naomi Park walked in. She came in focused, with that look attorneys get when they're already sorting facts into categories. Lawful, not lawful. Liability, exposure. She asked to see what the agents had. They handed over papers like it would end the conversation. Naomi read them. Right there in the cafe. In front of witnesses. In front of cameras. And her expression didn't say, okay. It said, problem. Naomi didn't treat it like a debate. She treated it like a compliance check. She looked at the paperwork the agents brought in and immediately separated what they wished it meant from what it actually authorized. She pointed out the problem in plain terms. Nothing in their hands gave them the right to enter employee-only space, force on-the-spot questioning, or detain someone inside a private workplace just because they wanted to. That shift mattered. Up to that moment, the agents tried to run the room on confidence. Naomi ran it on process. Owen stayed in the same spot. Staff stayed locked in. That human line didn't wobble. The agents tried a new tactic. They leaned into the idea that they only needed a quick conversation and that everyone was overreacting. Naomi cut that off by explaining that workplace encounters don't work on vibes. Authority has lanes. If they wanted access past the public area, they needed the right kind of warrant. A judge-signed one. Then, she went sharper. She warned them they were drifting into trespass and interference with a business operation. She reminded them they were on camera from multiple angles. Security cameras, too. She didn't threaten. She just described the exposure like a weather report. The agents clocked the cameras again. You could almost see them recalculating in real time. One agent tried to flip the pressure onto Owen, implying he was blocking lawful federal work. Naomi didn't let that framing stand. She made it clear Owen didn't have to help them reach an employee inside a protected area. If they lacked judicial authority, the business had every right to deny access, period. That's when the agents tried to create a workaround. They attempted to call Lena out to the public area, not by asking politely, by acting like they could summon her the way a manager summons an employee, like she was obligated to step forward and make it easier for them. Lena didn't move. Maya stayed close to her without hovering. Jamal didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence carried the message. Customers kept recording. One regular shifted positions to keep all three agents in frame. Another customer, the one by the door, didn't just film. They narrated what was happening so the video had context if anyone tried to twist it later. Smart move. People forget details. A voice on the recording locks them down. The agents changed tone again. Less push, more irritation. They acted like the whole cafe was being unreasonable, like the staff were making a simple thing complicated. Naomi didn't care how they felt about it. She repeated the bottom line. They had no judicial warrants, so they weren't going behind the counter, and they weren't detaining anyone at this workplace. If they stayed and kept pressing, they risked turning this into a trespass situation with witnesses and video. The longer they stood there, the worse it got for them. Owen backed her up with the same calm posture he'd kept from the start. He didn't argue motives. He didn't accuse them of anything. He just refused to let them set the terms. That's when the agents finally started to lose their grip on the room. They couldn't isolate Lena. They couldn't get behind the counter. They couldn't scare Owen into stepping aside. And they couldn't stop the filming without making the situation even more radioactive. So they did what people do when they realize the record isn't going their way. They left the cafe without touching Lena, without speaking to her, without stepping behind the counter, and the second the door shut behind them, the whole place exhaled. Lena's hands started shaking after it was over, not during. That delayed reaction hit hard. It usually does. Your body waits until you're safe to let you feel it. Owen went straight into manager mode. He asked Priya to pull the security footage and back it up immediately. He asked Maya to write down a timeline while it was fresh. Times, positions, what each agent did, what they tried, who recorded, all of it. Naomi told them to preserve everything and keep communications tight. No random posts from staff that could muddy details. Let the evidence speak. Let counsel handle the rest. Meanwhile, the customers uploaded clips to social media before the staff finished wiping down the counter. Same core truth. Masked ICE agents walked into a neighborhood cafe and tried to pressure their way to a worker without the proper warrant, and the entire room refused to cooperate. By that night, people weren't just talking about the cafe. They were talking about how easily a last name can become a target. And within days, Lena sat across from an immigration attorney who didn't start with reassurance. He started with questions. What record? What match? What identifier? Because something about it didn't add up. The internet did what it always does when there's clean video and a clear power imbalance. It picked a side fast. People didn't just share the clip. They dissected it, frame by frame. They pointed out how the agents entered masked, how they tried to drift behind the counter, how they kept pushing after the owner denied access, how the staff formed a wall without touching anyone. That detail mattered. The cafe didn't give anyone an excuse to claim threat. They just refused entry. Local pages picked it up first, then statewide accounts, then national immigration advocates, then the outlets that chase anything with a badge and a viral clip. Lena watched strangers argue about her identity like it was entertainment. She didn't want fame. She wanted her name clean and her job normal again. Too late. Customers started coming in just to stare. Some people tried to support. Others tried to fish for details. One guy even asked if she was legal right there at the register, like he was entitled to an answer because he bought a coffee. Owen kicked him out. No discussion. Rafael Mendoza didn't treat it like a PR story. He treated it like an evidence problem. He asked for every detail the staff had. Timeline, camera angles, names, badge numbers if anyone caught them. Naomi already had the groundwork set. Security footage saved in multiple copies. Phone videos collected. Written statements drafted while memories were fresh. Then Rafael went hunting for the reason Lena got targeted at all. The government line, at first, stayed vague. They leaned on the usual language about an ongoing enforcement matter and operational discretion. They didn't want to hand over specifics. Rafael pushed anyway. He demanded the underlying basis for the match. He asked for the identifiers the agents used before they walked into that cafe and tried to pull a worker into a workplace interrogation. When the records finally surfaced through the legal process, the match looked worse than anyone expected. It wasn't a direct hit tied to Lena. It traced back to Lena's sister. An old immigration record that should have stayed attached to one person, one file, one set of identifiers. Somewhere along the line, a database association linked Lena to it. Last name, family connection. Maybe a shared address years ago. The kind of lazy linkage that software creates when humans don't force it to be precise. The agents didn't cross-check basics before showing up. No meaningful confirmation. No clean photo comparison. No verified date of birth match. No make sure this is the right person step. They moved on a name and a flawed system suggestion, like it was enough. That's when this stopped being a scary afternoon story and became a lawsuit. Lena filed against the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, exactly the way her legal team planned it. Not as a vague complaint. As a tight documented chain of actions, entry, pressure, attempted access beyond public space, attempted workplace questioning without proper authority, continued push after denial, all captured on video. The defense tried the predictable angle. They implied the agents only intended a consensual contact. They tried to paint the cafe's resistance as misunderstanding. They tried to shrink the encounter into a harmless check-in. The footage didn't cooperate. Depositions made it worse. Under oath, the agents couldn't dress it up the way they did in the moment. Their own answers showed the shortcuts, the lack of verification, the choice to arrive masked in a public business, the choice to keep pushing once the owner refused entry, the choice to treat a workplace like a hunting ground. And the attorneys didn't just ask what they did, they asked what training said, what policy required, what supervisors approved, who told them the database hit was good enough, who signed off on moving without deeper confirmation. That dragged supervisors into it. Then internal communications. Then the agency had to explain, in plain English, why 3 agents walked into a cafe and tried to get to an employee without the kind of warrant Naomi asked for on minute 1. Lena's life narrowed during that period. Work, home, attorney meetings. She started jumping at unfamiliar cars outside her apartment. She didn't trust that the mistake was finished just because the agents left the cafe. A lot of people would feel that way after being targeted by name. Owen took heat too. A few online accounts accused him of protecting illegals. He didn't respond with speeches. He kept repeating one fact. His business followed the law, and the agents showed up without judicial authority to go behind the counter or detain someone at work. More businesses in the district started calling Naomi. They wanted copies of that law enforcement contact policy. They wanted training for their staff. They wanted the same calm script Owen used, because they saw how fast a normal day can turn. Months later, the case didn't fade. It sharpened. The judge let key claims move forward. Motions got argued. The public watched. The video stayed online. Every time someone tried to spin it, another angle surfaced. And then the date landed. Federal trial. Lena didn't walk into that courtroom as a viral clip. She walked in as the plaintiff with evidence, witnesses, and sworn testimony, showing the system didn't just make a mistake. It tried to act on that mistake in public, at her job, like she had no rights in the space where she earned her living. Trial week didn't feel like a big, dramatic movie moment. It felt like a slow grind where every tiny decision from that afternoon got dragged into daylight. Lena sat at counsel table while the government tried to frame the cafe incident as routine contact. They leaned hard on the idea that the agents didn't force anything, because nobody got physically grabbed. That was their lane. Make it sound harmless. Make it sound normal. Make it sound like everyone overreacted. Lena's attorney didn't let them set the definition. He put the timeline on the screen and treated the footage like a clock. He walked the jury through the same things you already saw online, but now with sworn testimony lined up behind it. He showed how the agents entered masked and moved with intention, not curiosity. He highlighted how they tried to drift toward employee-only space. He pointed out how they continued pressing after Owen denied access. He emphasized the part that mattered most. The agents acted like they could turn a workplace into an enforcement site without the authority required to do it. Then the defense had to answer the simple question they'd been dodging since day one. What did they actually have? Not vibes, not assumptions, not a database suggestion, actual verified basis. That's where it went sideways for them. Raphael's work turned into a centerpiece. He explained the match in normal language, no tech jargon. A flawed database association tied to Lena's sister. A last name and family link chain that got treated like certainty. He laid out the missing cross-checks. The obvious ones. The ones that would have prevented the agents from even stepping into that cafe. The jury heard it, and you could feel the temperature drop. Because once you realize they didn't verify, you have to face the next reality. If nobody had pushed back, they would have reached her. They would have questioned her at work. They might have detained her on a bad match. And they were ready to do it in front of customers like It was no big deal. Owen testified too, not as a crusader, as a business owner who knew his rights and his responsibilities. He described the policy he kept for law enforcement contact. He explained why he asked for a judicial warrant. He explained why he didn't let them behind the counter. He described how the staff formed a barrier without touching anyone because they understood the game. Don't escalate. Don't give them a reason to claim threat. Just deny access and document. Naomi testified and made it even cleaner. She explained what the paperwork meant and what it didn't. She explained why it didn't authorize workplace detention or entry into non-public areas. She explained why she warned them about trespass and interference. She didn't sound emotional. She sounded exact. That's what made it hit. Then came the depositions that got played for the jury. The agents had already committed to their story under oath, and their story showed how thin their verification was. They tried to explain why they moved fast. They tried to say they relied on systems. The more they talked, the more it sounded like speed mattered more than accuracy. The jury watched the cafe footage again after hearing all that. Now, it wasn't just a standoff. It was proof of intent, movement, pressure, a refusal to accept no until legal counsel showed up and made the risk real. And when Lena testified, she didn't try to perform. She described what it felt like to be targeted by name at work, with masked agents pushing forward like the space didn't belong to her. She explained how she kept quiet because she didn't want to make it worse. She explained what happened after, the fear, the attention, people treating her identity like public property. Closing arguments weren't flashy. They didn't need to be. Lena's attorney told the jury the case wasn't about politics. It was about process and harm. He told them the government can't treat a database error like a license to pressure someone at their job. He told them the footage showed the agents tried to do it anyway. The defense tried to shrink it down again. They called it a misunderstanding. They suggested no real injury occurred because Lena went home that day. The jury didn't buy it. The verdict landed hard. A major jury award of $10.3 million, exactly as written. The number told everyone what the jury thought of the government's version of events. After that, consequences came fast. Internal reviews didn't stay internal. Supervisors had to answer for sloppy verification standards. The agency tightened rules for workplace attempts and the threshold for action based on database hits. More required cross-checking. More documented confirmation before anyone approached someone at their job. More limits on pushing beyond public space without the correct warrant. They didn't do it out of kindness. They did it because liability got expensive and public. Lena didn't disappear after the check. She used part of the outcome to fund legal help and training for workers and small businesses. Real training. Scripts people could use under pressure. Policies owners could print and post. A hotline connection through attorneys who understood the system. She didn't sell fantasies. She sold preparation. A year later, she got invited to speak at conferences about workplace rights and enforcement contact protocols, including one in Chicago. She didn't act like a celebrity. She spoke like someone who survived something that never should have happened and decided to turn it into protection for others. Here's the lesson, and it's not complicated. Power counts on confusion. It counts on people folding because they don't know what's allowed. Owen didn't win because he argued. He won because he demanded process and refused to let the rules get invented on the spot. Lena didn't win because she got lucky. She won because her workplace didn't isolate her, and because everything got documented from multiple angles. What would you have done if masked agents walked into your job and started demanding access to a coworker? Would your workplace have a plan, or would everyone freeze? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you've ever dealt with something like this, share what helped you hold your ground. And make sure you subscribe, because these stories aren't just drama. They're a playbook for what accountability looks like when people stop getting intimidated and start getting smart.
Hey, what's going on here? What are you doing right here?
Having coffee? What's the reason you approached?
I need to see IDs, all of you.
Officer, please tell the reason.
Just cooperate. If you got nothing to hide, this is quick.
If you can't state a reason, you can't demand identification.
Dad.
What happens when a patrol officer walks up to a family at a cafe table, can't name a crime, and still demands IDs anyway? Here's the part people don't expect. The cameras don't just catch a bad vibe moment. They catch an unlawful stop getting built on the spot. Quick thing, where are you watching from? Country, state, city, drop it in the comments. And if you want more stories where people keep their rights and keep receipts, hit like and subscribe. Now back to it. This started in the middle of a normal afternoon. Deputy U.S. Marshal Marcus Reed sat outside with his wife, Danielle, and their teenage son, Jordan. Upscale plaza, outdoor cafe tables, shoppers walking by with bags, a few strollers parked near the seating, people minding their business. Marcus's family was doing the same, waiting on drinks, talking quietly, nothing loud, nothing suspicious, no one complaining. Then one patrol officer decided they didn't belong. The officer walked up with that posture that's not friendly and not curious. More like he already made a decision and just needed the scene to match it. He started asking questions that didn't have a point. What are you doing here? Where are you headed? Are you from around here? Stuff like that. Not a single clear reason. No mention of a call, no report, no, we're looking for someone. Just pressure. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't get heated. He didn't do a speech. He did what trained people do when they hear nonsense dressed up as authority. He narrowed it down. He asked what the officer was investigating. He asked what legal reason existed for the questions. He asked whether his family was being detained or if they were free to go. That's when the officer's tone changed. Some officers answer and move on. This one took the questions as disrespect. Not because Marcus raised his voice. Because Marcus didn't submit to a vague stop. The officer switched from vague to controlling. He started giving directions. Trying to move the family away from the table, trying to turn a cafe seat into a little scene he could manage. Then he went where he wanted to go from the start. He pushed for ID. Marcus didn't refuse like a guy trying to be difficult. He stayed calm and practical. He kept his hands visible. He stayed seated. He didn't crowd the officer. He kept repeating the same point. If there's no crime being investigated, there's no reason to demand IDs. The officer tried the classic guilt move, the if you've got nothing to hide energy. He acted like compliance was a favor Marcus owed him. Marcus didn't give him that, because Marcus knew how reports get written when there's no video. A vague approach becomes reasonable suspicion. A calm question becomes aggressive behavior. A family sitting still becomes refusing lawful commands. Marcus wasn't going to hand him material. So Marcus started recording, quietly, not performative. Phone held steady. Enough to catch the officer's face, his distance, his tone. Danielle started recording too from her side of the table. 2 angles, 2 audio tracks. That mattered. The officer noticed, and once he saw the phones, he got worse. He tried to control the story in real time. He started talking like he was narrating for supervisors later. He leaned into words like non-compliance without ever naming a lawful order. He edged closer, trying to make the family uncomfortable enough to move. That's the game. Make it awkward. Make it stressful. Make a normal person give up just to end it. But Marcus didn't move. He kept it simple. He kept it on record. He didn't insult the officer. He didn't threaten. He didn't show him a badge. He didn't need to. He just kept forcing the same question. What exactly is the reason for this stop? Jordan sat there watching all of it. That detail matters. A teenager doesn't hear policy. He hears tone. He watches who gets treated like a problem and who gets treated like a customer. Jordan's face tightened. Danielle noticed and kept him steady, a small hand on his arm. Quiet reassurance, No drama. People around them started to notice, too. At first, it was the usual. Quick glances, then eyes down. Nobody wants to be involved. Then they saw the basics of it. A family sitting still, an officer hovering. No clear reason. Phones recording. A stroller mom stopped walking and held her phone up, recording from a distance. A guy in business clothes slowed down and watched. A cafe worker looked out toward the tables, then disappeared inside like they were about to check the cameras. The officer saw the crowd shift. That's when he tried harder to regain control. He repeated the ID demand again. He tried to turn Marcus's calm questions into the problem. He tried to make the situation about attitude instead of legality. And this is where Marcus stayed disciplined. He didn't give the officer an excuse. No sudden movements, no yelling, no stepping into the officer's space. He kept his voice level and his words short. He kept asking if they were free to stay or free to leave. The officer still wouldn't answer cleanly. That's not an accident. If the officer says, "You're free to go," the stop ends. If he says, "You're detained," he needs a reason. So he stayed in the gray zone on purpose, trying to keep power without responsibility. Marcus didn't let him live there. While the officer talked, Marcus did something most people don't think to do in the moment. He locked in identifiers, badge number, unit info, time cues, the officer's exact position, the plaza camera poles in the background, the cafe entrance, the table number, details that make it impossible to rewrite later. The officer tried one more pressure move. He shifted his stance and reached toward his radio. Not an emergency motion. I can make this bigger motion. A threat without words. Marcus didn't react. He didn't flinch. He didn't rise to it. He stayed focused on one outcome. A clean record. Because Marcus wasn't trying to win a public argument. He was building the evidence trail that would outlast whatever the officer typed later. And right there, right as the officer started to call for backup, Marcus had already set the trap the right way. Multiple recordings, multiple witnesses, and fixed cameras overhead that don't care about anyone's ego. The officer touched his radio like he wanted the family to feel it. More uniforms, more pressure, more noise. Marcus didn't react. He let the officer make the choice on camera. The officer called it in. He framed it like he had a situation, even though he still hadn't named a crime. That's how these stops stretch. An officer starts it on a feeling, then tries to backfill the reason once other units show up. Two things happen at the same time. First, the crowd tightened. Not a mob, just attention. People stopped pretending they didn't see it. A couple phones stayed up. A few people repositioned like they didn't want to miss the next moment. Second, the officer started performing. He talked louder. He used official-sounding language. He tried to turn Marcus's calm questions into the issue like the family's attitude created the problem. He also started fishing for anything visible. Bags, pockets, the kid's hoodie. Anything he could point to later. Nothing was there. Danielle kept recording from her angle. Jordan stayed quiet. He looked between faces. He didn't look scared. He looked insulted. Big difference. Backup arrived fast. One unit, then another. Then a supervisor. Sergeant Lila Moreno walked in with a different energy. Not friendly, not hostile. She looked like someone who'd seen this exact scene 100 times and hated paperwork, even more than she hated being embarrassed in public. She asked the officer what he had. He tried to sell her a story. Suspicious behavior. Hanging around. Plaza issues. That vague word again. He leaned on it like it was a legal reason. Moreno didn't buy it immediately. She asked what specific crime he was investigating. She asked if anyone called. She looked around like she was checking whether this was about public safety or ego. The officer stalled. He kept talking without answering. He kept circling the same point. The family needed to identify themselves. Marcus stayed calm and kept doing the same thing because it works. He asked Moreno whether this was a detention. He asked what legal basis supported it. He asked if his family was free to stay seated and finish their coffee or free to leave. Moreno tried to end it the easy way. She pushed for cooperation without calling it a detention. That's a common move, too. She wanted compliance without responsibility. Marcus didn't take the bait. He made it simple for her, on camera, with witnesses listening. Either the family was detained for a stated reason, or the officer needed to step back. That's when the patrol officer slipped. He stopped pretending it was about safety and started talking about fit. He pointed at the plaza like it had an unspoken rule. He described the kind of people who usually sat there. He said the family didn't match that. He didn't say the word race out loud. He didn't need to. Everyone heard it. You could see it in the bystanders. A few people's faces changed at the same time. That stroller mom didn't move her phone. The suited guy started talking to his own camera, like he was narrating what he just heard. Even the cafe worker froze by the doorway for a second. Moreno clocked it too. She didn't want that on record. Not like that. Not in public. She pulled the officer back a step and asked again for the actual reason. Clear, specific, something she could defend later. He still didn't have one. Now he got frustrated because his little power play had an audience, and the audience wasn't on his side. He tried one more time to force the ID demand, acting like repetition made it lawful. Marcus kept his voice steady and his words short. He didn't argue motives. He didn't accuse. He didn't call names. He just made Moreno answer the only question that mattered. Were they free to leave? Moreno finally did what supervisors do when the video looks bad and the legal basis looks worse. She shut it down. She told the officer to end it. She told the family they weren't detained. She tried to smooth it over without admitting fault, but she also didn't order Marcus to hand over anything. That alone told you she knew the stop didn't stand up. Marcus didn't celebrate. He didn't posture. He stayed seated for a beat longer and made sure the ending was on video. Then he did another smart thing. He asked for names and badge numbers while everyone was still standing there. Moreno gave hers. The other units did too. The patrol officer hesitated, then gave his. Marcus also made sure the cameras got called out. He didn't argue about whether cameras existed. He treated it like a fact and acted accordingly. He looked at the poles. He looked at the cafe entrance. He looked at the layout like he was mapping it, because he was. Danielle stayed composed the whole time. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Her phone did the talking. Jordan didn't say anything either, but he watched his dad hold a line without turning it into a scene. That mattered more than any lecture. The family stood up calmly. They didn't rush. They didn't apologize. They didn't try to prove they belonged. They just left. And the patrol officer had to stand there in front of his supervisor in a half circle of witnesses with no crime, no call, no legal reason, and multiple cameras recording how he tried anyway. That's where the real story started. Marcus didn't go home and cool off. He went home and locked the record down. He knew how these things get rewritten. First the report, then the language, then the little details that magically make the stop sound justified. He wasn't letting the paper beat the video, so he moved fast. He backed up both recordings, his and Danielle's, full files, originals preserved, copies stored in more than one place. He wrote the timeline while it was still sharp, minute by minute, where the officer stood, when backup arrived, when the supervisor showed, which cameras were visible, what the officer demanded, what he refused to explain. Then he went after fixed footage. The cafe had cameras. The plaza had cameras. Those systems overwrite on a schedule and nobody warns you. Marcus contacted the cafe manager first and asked for preservation, not a casual, "Can you send me a clip?" He asked what angles covered the table and the walkway. He asked the retention window. Then he contacted plaza security. He reached the security manager and made it clear this needed to be held as evidence, not a customer service issue. He gave the exact time block, the table location, the officer's position. the direction units arrived from. The manager placed a hold on the footage and logged it. That mattered. When footage is logged, it doesn't vanish. Bystander video came next. The stroller mom had a clean angle from a distance. The suited guy had longer footage with the crowd's reaction and the officer's body positioning. Marcus didn't argue with them online. He didn't make it a comment section war. He reached out privately, asked for the raw files, and got them transferred without compression. Now he had multiple sources that didn't depend on him. 2 family recordings, 2 bystander recordings, cafe camera export, pending plaza, security export, pending. That's when he filed the complaint, not a rant, not a speech. A structured statement with names, badge numbers, unit identifiers, and the core facts. An officer approached a family in a public place, couldn't name a crime, demanded IDs anyway, treated basic clarifying questions as attitude, escalated after noticing recording, and tried to keep the encounter in a gray zone where the family wasn't detained, but also wasn't free. He also requested the stuff departments hate being forced to produce. Dispatch logs for that time window, any call for service tied to that plaza body camera video from involved units, CAD notes, supervisor notes, unit arrival times. If the officer later claimed there was a complaint, those logs would either support him or expose him. No wiggle room. Internal Affairs responded fast. Not because they suddenly grew a conscience, because this one had risk all over it. Multiple recordings, a crowded upscale plaza, a teenager present, witnesses with no connection to the family. And Marcus wasn't some random guy they could dismiss. He came with a clean packet and a professional chain of custody mindset. The department issued an evidence preservation order. That locked down body cam, dispatch, radio traffic, and internal notes. No accidental deletion, no camera error, no convenient gaps. They pulled the officer off patrol pending review. Days later, the fixed footage landed, and it hit different than phone video. Phone footage catches sound and emotion. Fixed cameras catch distance, timing, and movement. They show who closed space, who hovered, who tried to reposition people. They show how long an officer stayed without naming a reason. They show whether anyone acted suspicious before the officer arrived. This footage showed a family sitting still, waiting on drinks, calm. It showed the officer initiate the contact. It showed him remain there while refusing to anchor the stop to any specific investigation. It showed him getting sharper the moment recording started. It showed the crowd noticing. It showed the supervisor coming in and trying to end it without owning it. That's where the officer's story started collapsing, because his report tried to frame it like he responded to concerns. The dispatch logs didn't back that up. No call tied to the family. No complaint describing them. No matching report from a business. Nothing. Internal Affairs didn't stop at the one incident. They pulled his stop history in that district. Same plaza, same shopping corridor, same vague issues language, same pattern of ID demands during consensual contacts that somehow turned into detentions when people asked questions. And the older complaints that went nowhere suddenly looked different when placed next to video that matched the same behavior. Now, the department had 2 problems. 1, this incident was bad on its own. 2, the pattern suggested it wasn't a one-time mistake. That's when consequences stopped being theoretical. The officer went from temporary reassignment to administrative leave. Then the department hit him with a sustained finding for an unlawful detention attempt and conduct unbecoming. They didn't have to debate motives. They didn't have to argue about vibes. The footage and logs did the job. Discipline followed. Real discipline. He lost street duty. He lost overtime, privileges tied to patrol. He took a long suspension without pay. The department also put a formal note in his file that triggered progressive discipline if he repeated anything similar. That part mattered more than people realize. It boxed him in. He appealed. Of course he did. His union tried the usual angles: officer safety, totality of circumstances, public order. They tried to turn the family's calm refusal into the justification. They tried to call questions non-compliance. But video doesn't care about buzzwords. The appeal didn't erase the findings. It reduced nothing meaningful. The discipline stayed. Then the city moved into damage control mode. A civilian oversight office requested the full file. The department had to provide it. The footage was too clean to bury and too public to gamble with. The city attorney's office got involved early because they saw the lawsuit coming from a mile away. Marcus didn't chase a payday. He chased accountability. He still protected his family's interests, though. He filed the claim, documented the harm, and kept it professional. The city settled rather than drag it into a public trial with multiple videos and no dispatch call. No victory parade. Just a check, signed agreement, and policy changes that would have never happened without pressure. The department updated procedure for consensual contacts in business districts. They tightened language around ID demands. They pushed a training block on the difference between a conversation and a detention with a reminder that "you don't fit here" isn't reasonable suspicion. Supervisors got directed to intervene faster when an officer can't articulate a crime. The plaza also updated its own protocol for footage preservation requests, so security staff wouldn't treat incidents like customer complaints. Now, the personal part. Jordan didn't walk away feeling brave. He walked away feeling exposed. He saw how fast normal turns into targeted. He saw how an officer can create a problem out of nothing, then blame the person who asks for clarity. Danielle handled that part at home. She didn't give him a lecture. She gave him facts. She explained why they stayed calm, why they recorded, why his dad didn't escalate, why they didn't prove they belonged. Marcus kept it simple, too. He didn't tell Jordan to be fearless. He told him to be prepared, to stay controlled, to document, to know the difference between cooperation and surrender. Months later, the plaza looked the same. The stores still sold the same expensive stuff. People still walked with bags and lattes like nothing happened. That's how these places work. They absorb a scandal and keep moving. But the family didn't forget, because that day taught one clear lesson. Rights don't protect you if you let someone talk you out of them. Calm questions matter. Recording matters. Third-party footage matters. And when the facts are locked down, the usual excuses don't survive. So here's the question for you. If you were sitting there with your family and an officer tried to turn a public table into a checkpoint, would you know how to keep it clean and safe without giving up your rights? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you've seen something like this, say it. Somebody reading needs to know they're not imagining it. And if you want more stories like this, realistic, modern, and built around receipts and accountability, like the video, subscribe and stay here.
Stand up, man. You're under arrest.
Why? What happened?
You're being detained. Stand up.
Detained for what? What's the reason you're saying detained?
I told you. Stand up.
Right? If someone called, say what they said. If there's a complaint, tell me what it is.
Man, you're making this hard. Show me your ID.
No. I'm asking for a supervisor.
What happens when a patrol officer tries to detain a calm black man in Bryant Park, demands ID, orders him to stand, and still won't say what call he's on or what crime he suspects? The answer isn't what you'd expect, because the cameras didn't just record a bad stop. They recorded a detention with no reason on the record. Quick check-in. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you're here for stories where power gets challenged with facts and receipts, hit like and subscribe. It helps this channel push back on the nonsense. Now here's what happened. It was lunch hour at Bryant Park. Crowded, loud, benches full. People eating, working, passing through. Nothing about the scene looked urgent. Anthony Gaines sat on a bench like anyone else. Calm, hands visible. No argument with anyone. No disturbance, just sitting. Officer Kyle Mercer walked up and went straight to control mode. No greeting, no explanation. He ordered Gaines to stand. Then he demanded ID. Then he said Gaines was being detained. Gaines didn't stand. He stayed seated, hands still visible, voice steady. He didn't give Mercer a reason to claim fear or suspicious movement. He kept it simple and procedural. He asked what the legal basis was for the detention. Mercer didn't answer that. He repeated the commands. That's when it got obvious to everyone around them. Mercer wanted compliance first. The reason could be invented later, or never said at all. Gaines asked again, still calm. What crime was being investigated? What specific facts created reasonable suspicion? Was he free to leave or not? Mercer kept dodging. No mention of a dispatch call, no mention of a complaint, no mention of a description, no explanation. Just the detention label and louder orders. People started paying attention. At first, bystanders did the usual. Quick glance. Back to their food. Nobody wants a front row seat to police drama, but Mercer's approach didn't match the situation. It was aggressive without context. It looked like a stop that ran on attitude, not facts. One person pulled out a phone, then another, then a third. You could see the moment the crowd decided this needed witnesses. Mercer noticed the phones. His body language tightened. He leaned harder into authority. He repeated the stand order like it was the whole point of the interaction. Gaines still didn't move. He kept his tone flat and professional. He asked Mercer to state the reason out loud. On camera, he asked for Mercer's name and badge number. He asked for a supervisor. This mattered a lot, because when someone stays calm and asks basic legal questions, the officer has two options: give a reason, or escalate without one. And with phones up, escalation gets expensive. Mercer chose the third option people hate most. He kept pushing, but he kept refusing to say why. He tried to frame Gaines as the problem, like the refusal to stand was the issue, not the missing justification. He acted like obedience was the law itself. Gaines didn't take the bait. He didn't argue about feelings. He didn't insult the officer. He didn't raise his voice. He stayed locked on the same point. Detention needs a stated reason. The crowd got closer, not crowding Mercer, just making sure the cameras had clean angles, faces, badge, distance, Gaines' hands, the whole scene. Mercer's control plan started collapsing in real time. He couldn't claim Gaines was threatening. Gaines never stood up, never reached into pockets, never moved his hands out of view. He couldn't claim chaos because Gaines wasn't creating any. The only tension came from Mercer's own pressure. So Mercer pushed again, harder, same demands, same refusal to explain. Gaines asked for the supervisor again. Mercer hesitated. You could feel it. That split second where he realized he'd built the stop on nothing, and now he had witnesses. Then Gaines made the reveal. He identified himself as Anthony Gaines, the chief of police. That hit Mercer like a wall. He didn't recognize him. Mercer was new. Gaines wasn't in uniform. He looked like a regular guy on a bench. That's the point. The stop wasn't based on who Gaines was. It was based on what Mercer assumed he was. Mercer's tone changed immediately. His posture changed. The sharpness disappeared. The detention language evaporated. Now he wanted to de-escalate. Now he wanted to end it clean. Now he wanted it to be a misunderstanding. And he ended the detention fast. No citation, no charge, no paperwork on the spot. No, here's the report number. Nothing. Just a quick exit. That was the loudest part of the whole encounter. Because if Mercer had a real reason, he would have said it. If Mercer had a real call, it would have been easy to name. If Mercer had reasonable suspicion, he could have explained it in 10 seconds and kept doing his job. Instead, the stop ended the moment the person on the bench became someone Mercer couldn't afford to bully. Gaines didn't grandstand. He didn't posture for the crowd. He kept it professional. He made it clear the issue wasn't ego. The issue was procedure. You can't detain people and refuse to say why, especially when you're being recorded. Bystanders kept filming after Mercer backed off. Smart. They captured the flip. The before and after. The part where the officer acted one way toward a black man on a bench, then switched up the second authority, walked into the picture. And that clean timeline, plus body cam, set up what came next. Because the department couldn't ignore the basic question anymore. What triggered that stop? The video hit the internet the same day. Not because it was loud, because it was clean. A calm black man sat still with visible hands. A patrol officer walked up and jumped straight to commands. The officer said detention. The man asked for a legal basis. The officer never gave one. Phones came out. The officer got tighter. Then the man revealed he was the police chief. The officer ended it immediately. No ticket, no charge, no paperwork. That last part mattered more than people realized at first. No paperwork meant no official footprint. No footprint meant nobody could audit it later. That's how these encounters stay invisible. Except this time, the phones and the body cam made their own paperwork. By the next morning, the department couldn't pretend it was just a weird moment in a park. The city manager's office had calls. The Civilian Oversight Board had emails. Local reporters requested records. People wanted two simple things: the dispatch trigger and the stop report. The first review happened fast. It always does when the person involved sits at the top of the chain. Chief Gaines didn't run it like revenge. He ran it like a test. He ordered a standard internal review like any complaint would trigger. Body cam, CAD logs, radio traffic, supervisor notifications, paper trail, everything. And right away, something didn't line up. Investigators pulled Mercer's body cam footage and synced it with the time of day. Then they pulled the computer-aided dispatch logs for that area during that window. They also checked radio traffic and any unit-to-unit messages. No call matched, no complaint matched, no dispatch assignment matched. That didn't automatically mean Mercer had no reason. Officers can do proactive policing. They can do welfare checks. They can respond to something flagged by another unit. They can observe a specific violation. But if that's the case, they usually say it because they need it on the record. Mercer didn't. So the team went to the second thing: documentation. If Mercer truly detained Gaines, that wasn't a casual conversation. Detention triggers reporting requirements in most departments. Stop forms, field interview cards, at minimum a log entry, something that shows who got stopped and why. They searched the system. Nothing. No stop report under Gaines's name. No field interview entry. No memo. No supervisor note. No entry that even suggested Mercer had made contact and declared detention. That was the moment the review stopped being about one bad interaction and started being about process abuse. Because here's the trick with these stops. An officer can create a detention in real life, then delete it afterward by simply not documenting it. The person lived it, and the public saw it, but the department's databases act like it never happened. That's why this one blew up. It was a detention that tried to leave no trace, except the trace was already on the internet. The oversight team widened the scope. They didn't start with bias as a conclusion. They started with a question: was Mercer skipping stop documentation as a habit? So they pulled Mercer's activity history, not just arrests, not just tickets. They looked at body cam activation patterns, GPS pings, and the gaps between calls. They found a repeating shape. Mercer had lots of short contacts that didn't turn into citations, arrests, or reports. That's not automatically wrong. Most police contacts don't end in enforcement, but the pattern got weird when they paired it with body cam. They saw Mercer initiating contact, giving commands, pushing for ID, sometimes using detention language, then ending the interaction with nothing written down. Then they noticed another thing. The stops ended faster when a bystander filmed, or when the person being stopped knew how to ask the right questions without getting emotional. That wasn't proof by itself, but it was a flag, a big one. So investigators sampled more footage. Different days, different neighborhoods. Similar approach. They also compared the demographics from the few contacts that did get documented versus the contacts that didn't. The department had enough data to see the imbalance even with missing reports. The imbalance pointed in one direction. More black people showed up in the undocumented contact footage than in Mercer's official stop data. That meant the reporting system wasn't just incomplete, it was misleading. The oversight team brought supervisors into the room next. They asked basic questions. Who trained Mercer? Who signed off on his field activity? Who reviewed his body cam? Who was checking for stop reports? Who was auditing detain and release encounters? Supervisors gave the usual answers. They said they trusted officers to use discretion. They said they couldn't watch every minute of footage. They said paperwork focused on arrests and citations. That explanation didn't hold up once the team laid the timeline out. Mercer declared detention in public with no stated basis, then produced no documentation. That wasn't a paperwork issue. That was a legal exposure issue. Detentions require a reason. If he couldn't name it, he shouldn't have done it. If he did it, he had to document it. The department placed Mercer on administrative leave while the investigation continued. That step wasn't optional. The case had body cam. It had multiple public recordings. It had a missing dispatch trigger. It had a missing stop report. It had a pattern forming behind it. Then the older complaints started coming back. Once people saw Mercer's name in the news coverage, past complainants recognized it. Some had stopped filing because nothing happened the first time. Others had never filed because they assumed it would be pointless. Now they had a reason to try again. The oversight unit reopened files that had been closed as unfounded or inconclusive. They pulled footage tied to dates people had listed. They checked whether stop reports existed. They checked if the reasons on paper matched what Mercer said on camera. And the same problem kept showing up. Vague justifications spoken loosely in the moment, then no documentation, or documentation that didn't match the body cam. By the end of the second week, the department had more than a viral video. They had a stack of incidents that all relied on the same tactic. Control first, explanation later, paperwork never. And that's when the case moved from internal embarrassment to formal accountability. Once the oversight team had the Bryant Park footage synced with body cam and dispatch logs, they stopped treating it like a PR issue. They treated it like a compliance failure with a human face. They built the timeline the boring way, minute by minute. They matched Mercer's body cam timestamps to the CAD system. They checked radio traffic. They pulled supervisor logs. They looked for any trigger that could justify Mercer walking up and declaring detention. They found none. No dispatch call. No be on the lookout. No complaint. No park security request. Nothing that explained why Mercer picked that bench and went straight to stand-up Idaho detained. Then, they stacked the older encounters next to it. Same pattern kept showing up. Mercer approached. He controlled the pace. He demanded ID early. He used detention language loosely. He avoided naming a specific violation. He ended the contact abruptly when someone filmed, or when the person stayed calm and asked for the legal basis. The missing paperwork connected everything. Investigators didn't just accuse him of bias. They proved the operational trick. Mercer created real-world detentions and then erased them from the system by not documenting them. That meant supervisors couldn't review what they couldn't see. It also meant the department's public-facing stop data stayed clean while people still got stopped. And that's exactly why the case survived review. Because it wasn't opinion. It was records. Or the lack of them. The department put Mercer through the formal process. Not a quick firing to satisfy the internet. They gave him a chance to explain. They gave him representation. They held hearings. They compared his statements to the video. They compared his reasons to what he actually said in the moment. He couldn't square it. If he claimed he had reasonable suspicion, the footage didn't show him naming it. If he claimed he acted on a call, the dispatch system didn't back him up. If he claimed it was a simple conversation, his own body cam caught him calling it a detention and issuing orders. That's the corner he backed himself into. Cameras don't care about excuses made later. The reopened complaints made it worse. People came forward with dates, locations, and the same story structure. Mercer rolled up, got demanding fast, then left without writing anything down. Some complainants had names of witnesses. Some had partial recordings. Some had nothing except a memory and a time window. Oversight used that to pull body cam segments and GPS pings. They didn't need every complainant to have video. They just needed enough examples to show it wasn't an accident. They got enough. The department kept Mercer on leave while they finished the review. Then, they terminated him after the evidence held up through the final decision process. That outcome didn't happen because the man on the bench turned out to be the chief. It happened because Mercer created a clean record of himself, doing the thing he wasn't supposed to do, and he did it in the worst possible place, in public, in daylight, during lunch hour, with 10 phones pointed at him. Chief Gaines handled the aftermath carefully. He didn't act like the hero. He didn't tour the news stations. He didn't turn it into a victory lap. He treated it like what it was, proof that the department had a blind spot, big enough for one officer to hide a pattern inside it. So they tightened the system. They changed the detention documentation rules, so officers couldn't play games with language. If an officer restricted someone's movement, even briefly, it triggered a required entry. No entry meant a problem. They added supervisory checks. If an officer initiated multiple stops with no documentation, supervisors had to review body cam and explain why the stop reports were missing. They built audits into the workflow. Not random once a year, regular, predictable. Enough that officers knew the department would actually look. They clarified the standard for asking for ID. Not every contact justified it. They trained officers to state the reason early and clearly, not after the fact. They reinforced body cam expectations. If an officer started a contact and the camera wasn't running, that became its own issue. No more selective recording, and they made sure the oversight unit got automatic access to certain triggers. Repeated short stops with no paperwork. Repeated contacts ending right after bystanders started filming. Those patterns went to review without needing a viral video to force it. That's the part people don't talk about enough. Terminating one officer doesn't fix the system. Closing the loophole does. A few months later, Bryant Park stayed Bryant Park. Busy lunches, people on benches, tourists with maps, normal life. But inside the department, that one bench stop changed how detentions got tracked. It forced the agency to admit something uncomfortable. If you don't require documentation, you don't have accountability. You have vibes and excuses. And if you're watching this thinking it couldn't happen to you, ask yourself something simple. If a cop can't clearly say why you're being detained, how long do you think they'll keep trying anyway if nobody's recording? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you have stayed seated like Gaines did, hands visible, calm, procedural? Or would you have stood up just to make it end faster? Share this with someone who needs it. And if you want more real-world accountability stories told straight, hit subscribe and stick around.
Evening. What's going on tonight? What are you doing near this car?
Getting coffee. Took a minute in the lot. What's the reason for the contact?
I need to see your driver's license.
State the legal basis.
Where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Who are you meeting?
I'm not answering extra questions without a reason.
You're being evasive. Turn
My
around.
hands are visible. You have my ID. Say the reason.
What happened when a patrol officer decided a black internal affairs chief looked suspicious for sitting in his own car with a coffee and kept escalating even after learning who he was? It didn't end with an awkward apology. Where are you watching from? Drop your state or country in the comments. And if you like stories where somebody tries a power move and the footage forces consequences, hit like and subscribe. You'll want the next part because this officer didn't just overstep, he documented it. Now, rewind. Briar Ridge PD had been trying to look clean lately. New statements, new training memos, supervisors reminding everybody about professionalism. The public heard it and rolled their eyes. Inside the department, some officers treated it like noise. Internal Affairs didn't treat it like noise. Deputy Chief Malcolm Brooks ran IA. Black man. Mid-40s. Not flashy. Not a speech guy. He was a paperwork and proof guy. The kind of supervisor who didn't need to yell because he could pull the footage and line it up with the policy. That evening, Brooks wasn't running an operation. No sting, no secret meeting. He was off duty in the practical way high-ranking cops are off duty, meaning his phone still buzzed and his mind didn't fully shut off. He grabbed a coffee and parked in a gas station lot for a few minutes, sitting, checking messages, decompressing. Officer Nolan Kincaid saw the car and decided it didn't belong. Kincaid had a reputation on patrol, loud confidence, quick to treat questions like disrespect, the type who believed control came from pressure. He also had a history of complaints that never landed hard enough to stick, the kind of paper trail that always had "not sustained" stamped on it somewhere. That's why this night mattered. Not because it was dramatic, because it was normal. And normal is where people show who they are. Kincaid pulled in behind Brooks's sedan and hit him with the spotlight. He didn't start with a simple greeting. He started with authority, ID request. What are you doing here? Why are you sitting here? The vibe wasn't curiosity, it was accusation. Brooks didn't match energy. He didn't try to big rank him yet. He gave ID. He kept his hands where they could be seen. He asked a basic question back. What was the reason for the contact? Kincaid didn't answer cleanly. He circled around it. He implied the car looked suspicious. He implied Brooks was being difficult for even asking. Brooks noticed Kincaid's stance. Kincaid kept angling his body, like he wanted the Bodycam audio to be messy, like he wanted the record to be unclear. Brooks made it clear without drama that the interaction was being recorded beyond just the Bodycam, dash cam, lot cameras, everything. That should have cooled Kincaid down. A smart officer hears multiple cameras and stays professional. Kincaid doubled down. And that's the point where Brooks finally did identify himself properly. Name, badge, title. Still calm. Still controlled. Kincaid processed it. You could feel it in the pause. Then he did something that told you everything you needed to know. He didn't reset. He didn't apologize. He didn't step back. He got more aggressive. That little pause after Kincaid read the ID, it didn't soften him. It hardened him. He looked at Malcolm Brooks like Brooks had personally insulted him by existing in that seat. Then he started talking the way some cops talk when they think they've been challenged. Not about the parking lot. Not about safety. About control. Kincaid told Brooks the stop wasn't over. He told him to step out of the vehicle. He framed it like Brooks was delaying on purpose. Like asking for a reason was arguing. Brooks kept it tight, hands visible, calm tone. He repeated the same point. He'd comply with lawful orders, and he wanted the legal basis stated clearly. Simple, professional. The kind of answer that gives an officer a clean exit if the officer wants one. Kincaid didn't take the exit. He shifted into contempt. He started taking shots at internal affairs as a concept. He painted IA as people who sit behind desks and ruin careers. He made it personal by making it about Brooks's position, like Brooks didn't earn it, like it was a gimmick. And then he did the thing officers do when they want to manufacture justification. He started fishing. He said he needed to check the car. He implied he had reasons. He leaned in toward the window like he was sniffing for something that wasn't there. He asked questions that weren't connected to anything. Where Brooks was coming from, where he was going, why he was parked, who he was meeting, why he was in this part of the city. He wasn't investigating a violation. He was looking for a hook. Brooks didn't get dragged into the trap. He didn't answer extra. He didn't volunteer a story Kincaid could twist. He stayed focused on process. He asked if he was being detained or free to go. He asked for the specific violation. He reminded Kincaid again that the interaction was being recorded by more than one camera. That reminder hit Kincaid the wrong way. You could almost feel it. Kincaid stepped a half pace back, then repositioned so his body blocked the cleanest angle of his own camera. He also raised his voice, not to communicate, but to dominate. He wanted it loud. He wanted it messy. He wanted the record to sound like compliance problem instead of officer problem. Brooks stayed even. Then Kincaid made the next move in the chess game. He tried to turn Brooks into a suspect with labels. He described Brooks as non-compliant. He described him as evasive. He described him as hostile without Brooks being hostile at all. That kind of language matters because it's the foundation officers use later to justify everything else. Brooks didn't argue the labels. He challenged the facts underneath them. He asked Kincaid to repeat on camera what order he was giving and what law it was tied to. He asked if a supervisor was being called. He kept giving Kincaid the same off-ramp, say the reason, do this correctly, end it. Kincaid didn't want to correct. He wanted submission. So he escalated again. He threatened removal from the car. He hinted at cuffs. He used that tone that says, I can do whatever I want, and you can't stop it. Brooks didn't flinch. He didn't dare him either. He just made it clear he wasn't consenting to any search, and that if Kincaid believed he had legal cause, he needed to articulate it and be ready to explain it to command staff. Brooks wasn't flexing. He was forecasting. That's when Kincaid's taunts got uglier. He didn't use slurs. He didn't need to. He went for that coded disrespect some people use when they want to put a black man in his place without saying it outright. He implied Brooks was only in that position because the city wanted a certain image. He implied Brooks didn't understand real policing. He implied oversight was the enemy, and Brooks was the face of it. And here's what's crazy. Kincaid said all of this after he knew exactly who Malcolm Brooks was. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a choice. Brooks gave him one more clean warning, not a threat, a boundary. He told him the conduct was crossing into retaliation and harassment. He told him the record would reflect it. He told him to call a supervisor to the scene. Kincaid answered by going to the radio. He called for backup, and he painted Brooks as the problem. He didn't say, I've got the IA chief here, and I need a supervisor for transparency. He said the kind of thing that makes the responding units show up keyed up. He described a suspicious vehicle. He described a driver refusing commands. He framed it like officer safety was at risk. All while Brooks sat there, still, hands visible, coffee untouched, acting like a professional adult. Kincaid wanted the next officers to arrive already leaning his way. That's how these things get dangerous without anyone throwing a punch. Narrative first, reality second. Brooks didn't panic. He did something subtle instead. He positioned his phone so it would catch audio clearly, not to go viral. To preserve a clean record in case someone tried to summarize the stop later. Now Kincaid had a problem. He couldn't intimidate Brooks into silence. He couldn't bluff Brooks into consent. And he couldn't pretend cameras weren't watching. So he made it personal again. He leaned closer to the window and pushed the same demand out of the vehicle, like volume could substitute for legality. Headlights appeared at the edge of the lot a moment later. Another unit coming in hot. Kincaid straightened up like he was about to perform. Brooks stayed calm because he already knew the truth. Once other officers arrived, Kincaid wouldn't just be dealing with a driver. He'd be dealing with witnesses. The second unit hit the lot with urgency. Tires slowed hard. Doors opened fast. Kincaid turned into it like he'd been waiting for an audience. He started talking before anyone even got close enough to see Malcolm Brooks's face clearly, and he fed his version first. Drivers being difficult. Drivers refusing orders. Drivers making it unsafe. That's how these things go when someone's trying to control the record. Build the story early. Let everyone else inherit it. Sergeant Mateo Alvarez stepped out and did one quick scan. Cruiser placement, body language, hands, distance. Then his eyes landed on the driver. He recognized Brooks immediately. Alvarez didn't show panic, but his face tightened. He knew what this was. Not a normal stop. Not a misunderstanding. A career event. Officer Tessa Reed, the rookie, hovered behind Alvarez and followed his gaze. She recognized Brooks from department briefings and staff emails. Her posture changed on the spot, like her brain was trying to reconcile what she was seeing with what she'd been taught. Kincaid kept going anyway. He didn't reset his tone, he didn't back off. He acted like the badge on his chest gave him permission to ignore rank, process, and basic sense. He told Alvarez, loud, that Brooks was refusing to exit the vehicle and that he needed compliance. Alvarez didn't mirror the energy. He did the supervisor thing. He asked for the reason for the stop and the justification for the escalation. Clean questions, the kind that forces an officer to either articulate facts or admit he's running on ego. Kincaid didn't have facts. He had attitude. He tried to turn it into a department culture argument. He started complaining about oversight, about how IA always second-guessed patrol, about how certain people in leadership didn't respect street cops. He said it like it excused what he was doing in that moment. That was the slip. Because once he admitted his real focus wasn't the parking lot, it wasn't suspicious behavior, it wasn't safety, it was resentment toward internal affairs. The stop stopped being a stop. It became retaliation on camera. Brooks didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look impressed. He stayed steady and did something most people don't do under pressure. He kept it procedural. He told Alvarez he wanted the stop documented exactly as it was happening, with no side explanations and no private, let me tell you what really happened huddles. He also made it clear he wasn't consenting to any search, and that Kincaid still hadn't stated a lawful reason for the orders he'd been giving. Reed looked between them like she was watching a rulebook get tested in real time. Kincaid didn't like Brooks directing anything. You could see it hit his pride. He tried to reclaim control by stepping closer to the driver's window again. Alvarez cut that off. He ordered Kincaid to step back and give space. Not a suggestion. A supervisor order. Alvarez's voice came out controlled, but firm enough that Reed straightened up immediately. Kincaid hesitated. Kincaid? That tiny hesitation mattered too. It showed he was deciding whether to obey. He obeyed, but he made sure everyone saw his irritation. He kept talking, still trying to label Brooks as difficult, still trying to preserve his story. He wanted Alvarez to buy it. He wanted Reed to absorb it. He wanted the department's default loyalty to carry him over the gap, where his justification should have been. Alvarez didn't buy it. He asked again for the specific reason for the contact. Specific. Not vibes, not looked suspicious. A real reason. Kincaid tried to dodge again, and it landed flat, because now there were 3 cameras minimum on the scene. His own body cam, his dash cam, the store's lot cameras. Maybe Brooks' phone too. Alvarez knew that. Brooks knew that. Kincaid knew it most of all. Brooks finally gave Alvarez the key detail he'd been holding back. He identified himself clearly as the internal affairs chief and said he'd been sitting there drinking coffee, doing nothing illegal, when Kincaid decided to turn it into a confrontation. Alvarez took one more look at Kincaid. The look supervisors give when they realize they're going to be writing a lot of paperwork for someone who didn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. Then Alvarez made the call that changed the whole tone. He requested a command lieutenant to respond. Immediate. On scene. No delay. He also told Reed to stay present and observe. No wandering off, no go handle traffic. He wanted witnesses locked in. Kincaid tried one last angle. He acted like oversight was interfering with policing, like the department was handcuffing him, like he was the victim of leadership. Brooks didn't argue the speech. He didn't need to. He ended the confrontation the way an IA chief ends things, when someone's digging their own hole. He told Kincaid, calm and clear, that accountability wasn't a personal attack and it wasn't optional. It came with the job. And the record was going to reflect everything Kincaid had chosen to do after learning exactly who he was talking to. Kincaid went quiet for the first time. Not because he suddenly understood professionalism, because he finally understood consequences. The command lieutenant arrived and didn't waste time. He separated people. He asked for the reason for contact. He got the same vague answer Kincaid had been dodging with all night. Then the lieutenant did the one thing that tells you a supervisor knows a disaster when he sees one. He ended it. He told Brooks he was free to go. He told Alvarez to stay put and start the documentation. He told Kincaid to stop talking and keep his camera on. Kincaid tried to squeeze in a last narrative push on the spot. He wanted the lieutenant to validate him. He wanted someone higher up to say he did the right thing. That didn't happen. The lieutenant sent Kincaid back to the station, not to keep working, but to wait. That difference matters. Cops know it. Kincaid knew it too. Brooks left the lot like any other driver would. No victory lap, no speech, no theatrics. The coffee sat untouched the whole time. The point wasn't the coffee anyway. The point was the officer who chose to turn a normal moment into a power game. And now the cameras had a full record of every choice he made. Back at headquarters, the process started fast, the way it only starts fast when leadership knows the evidence is bad. Brooks didn't run the investigation himself. That's what people assume IA chiefs do. In reality, good departments avoid conflicts like that. Brooks triggered the process and stepped back from the lead role. He routed it to professional standards with oversight from command staff, clean chain, clean paperwork, no excuses later. First move, preservation. They locked the body cam footage before anyone could misplace it. Same for dash cam. Same for radio traffic, CAD notes, dispatch audio, the timestamps, the call history. They pulled the gas station surveillance too, because Kincaid's whole stop leaned on the idea that he had reason to treat Brooks like a problem. Lot footage doesn't care about vibes. It shows what happened. Second move, duty status. By the next shift, Kincaid sat on administrative leave. He still got pay at first. That's how it works in most places. Leave doesn't mean innocence. It means the department needed him off the street while they reviewed a stop that already looked like misconduct on its face. Third move, statements. Alvarez wrote his report the same night. He didn't dress it up. He described what he saw, what he heard, and how Kincaid behaved after learning who Brooks was. Reed wrote hers too. That rookie report mattered more than people think. Rookies don't have old loyalties yet. They describe what happened the way training taught them. Straight, unpolished, hard to spin. Kincaid's report hit the system later and read like a script. Lots of labels, few facts. A lot of uncooperative without clean articulation of why the contact escalated in the first place. Then the interviews came. Kincaid showed up with a union rep because of course he did. He leaned into the classic defenses. He framed it as officer safety. He framed Brooks as argumentative. He framed the situation as a misunderstanding. That strategy works when the record has gaps. This record didn't. The footage showed Brooks staying calm, hands visible, minimal movement, clear questions, no threats, no sudden moves, no behavior that justified the tone Kincaid used. The footage also showed Kincaid switching gears the moment he recognized the name. That was the part that killed him. Not because he made a bad call at first, because he doubled down after he knew. That's not confusion, that's intent. Professional standards pulled Kincaid's history next, not to punish him for old stuff, to test pattern. They looked at his past stops flagged as uncooperative subject. They compared those labels to video. They looked for the same pressure tactics, same narrative building, same habit of escalating, then writing like the driver forced his hand. They found enough to make leadership nervous. Not nervous about Kincaid, nervous about what it said the department had tolerated. Inside the building, the mood split fast. Some officers were furious at Kincaid for embarrassing them, not because they loved internal affairs, because he dragged the whole department into a mess that didn't need to exist. He made everyone look like they couldn't control their own people. Others got quiet. They'd seen Kincaid push people around before. They'd heard the way he talked when he thought nobody important was listening. This time, Somebody important was listening. With cameras. The rookies watched it like a lesson they didn't ask for. Reed especially. She saw how fast an officer could turn authority into bullying and still believe he was the victim. That sticks with you. Then it hit outside the building. The footage didn't stay internal. It never does anymore. A public records request came in. Local media caught wind of it. The city reviewed what could be released. They released enough. People saw the escalation, not as an isolated clip, but as a timeline. Start to finish. The officer's posture. The radio call. The way he tried to set the story before backup arrived. The way he kept pushing after he learned the man in the driver's seat ran internal affairs. And the public reaction wasn't confusion. It was recognition. A lot of people said the same thing in different words. If he acted like that toward the IA chief, imagine how he acted toward regular civilians who didn't know policy and didn't have rank. That's what damaged trust. Not the traffic stop, the mindset behind it. The department had to respond with something stronger than a memo. So they moved the case to a disciplinary board review with command staff and city HR present. They also looped in the city attorney because Kincaid's behavior raised legal risk, retaliation, abuse of authority, false statements, the kind of stuff that turns into lawsuits and settlements fast. Kincaid still tried to fight it. He filed a complaint against Brooks. He claimed Brooks provoked him. He framed it as leadership harassment. He wanted counterpressure. He wanted the process to slow down. It didn't slow down. The evidence ran too clean. The final findings hit in plain language. They substantiated harassment and unprofessional conduct. They substantiated insubordination because he ignored clear supervisory direction and kept escalating. They substantiated misuse of authority because the stop had no solid legal foundation once you stripped away the labels. They nailed him on report credibility too because his written narrative didn't match the video record. That's where departments usually stop. Suspension, demotion, quiet transfer. This time they didn't. They terminated him. He walked out without his badge. No second chance. No resignation in good standing. The department also forwarded the case to the state certification board. That step matters. It's what blocks the usual move where a fired cop just hops to the next town and gets rehired. Kincaid didn't just lose his job. He lost his path. After that, Briar Ridge had to do something internal that actually changed behavior, not just optics. They wrote new policy language targeting retaliatory contacts. They tightened rules around suspicious vehicle encounters, requiring clear articulation tied to observable facts. They added supervisor response requirements when a stop involved department personnel or when an officer claimed uncooperative without a clear lawful basis. They expanded Bodycam audits, so complaint categories triggered automatic review, not random spot checks. They also did something quietly powerful. They trained supervisors to step in early, the way Alvarez did, and they backed them up for it. No punishing a sergeant for correcting a problem officer. No leaving supervisors hanging while the union screams. Brooks kept doing his job. People expected him to gloat. He didn't. He treated it like any other case. Facts, record, outcome. That pissed off the thin blue ego crowd more than any speech would have. Because calm accountability is hard to argue with, and Reed, she went back to patrol with a different kind of confidence. Not the loud kind. The kind that comes from seeing the system work when it chooses to. Here's the lesson, and you've probably already got it. Power doesn't expose itself when everything's easy. It exposes itself when someone hears no and decides to punish the person who said it. Kincaid tried to punish a man for asking for lawful reasons. He kept going after he knew that man ran internal affairs. Cameras didn't create the misconduct. They just removed the escape hatch. Now I'm curious, what would you have done if you were Alvarez walking into that lot? Would you have checked your officer right there? Or would you have tried to smooth it over and handle it later? Drop it in the comments. And if you want more true-to-life stories where accountability actually lands and the footage forces consequences like the video. Share it with somebody who needs it and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.